Hello everybody! I have a fairy tale to read today, so let's hop right into it. Sound good? The name of the fairy tale is The Orange Frog and the Fairy, an election fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was an orange frog. He was not like the other frogs, and he found himself to be very handsome. He liked to impress the other frogs and all the creatures that lived in frog country. Many of the other frogs were green, but there were all colors and sizes of frogs and many different creatures, birds of all kinds, animals that were furry, fairies, elves, and gnomes, and insects that crawled and some that crawled and flew. One of the ways the orange frog tried to impress the other creatures in frog country was by building extravagant homes and businesses. He even built frog golf courses because, as anyone knows, frogs love to play golf. I think it has to do with all the green grass and the weeds and the water hazards. He tried to be a good frog. He even tried getting married and having tadpoles. He wasn't exactly successful in the marriage department. You see, he had a weakness for getting into predicaments with other lady frogs. Many, if not all the lady frogs he liked and loved were and are beautiful. This made the orange frog happy. After becoming popular with many of the other frogs and the creatures, the orange frog decided to hop for president. He won the election, and he felt joyful and proud of himself. He decided he was doing a good job at being the president, although he did make some mistakes along the way. Some of the frogs and other creatures in frog country were beginning to be concerned about some of his decisions, and the time was coming close to choose a frog for president again. The orange frog was very excited to be elected for another 4 years. He was hopping against an older and wiser frog. This frog was smart and he made good speeches, and this made the orange frog concerned. When it came time for the election, the older and wiser frog won. The orange frog was really upset. "How could this be?" he cried. "The election was rigged." Rigged means it was fixed so that the orange frog would lose. He called out to his frog supporters and all the creatures that had voted, "We need to do something about this." Many of the orange frog's friends and other creatures that liked the orange frog got together and stormed the greenhouse. The greenhouse was where the new president was going to live. It was also where many of the frogs and creatures worked and made laws for frog country. They broke windows and doors and valuable furniture, and many frogs and other creatures were hurt, some seriously. The lawmaker frogs and creatures were very frightened. The orange frog, that started the trouble by telling his supporters to fight for him, did nothing to stop the angry mob. The greenhouse had always been a safe place. The protest was called an insurrection. An insurrection means a violent uprising against an authority or government. This will go in the frogs and creatures history books as a sad time. It turned out that the orange frog was wrong, and that the election had been won by the old wiser frog fair and square. The orange frog had a difficult time accepting this. In the next 4 years, the wise older frog made improvements in frog country. He visited frog workers and creatures of all kinds, something the orange frog hadn't done. He passed laws to help with the world's climate, and he lowered the cost of medicine for everyone. The 4 years flew by, and it was time to elect a new frog president again. The orange frog felt this was his time to reign once more. I think the orange frog had hopes of becoming king instead of president, but that's a story we have yet to see. When it was getting closer to the election, The orange frog and the wise older frog had a debate. The orange frog told quite a few lies, and the wise older frog had a difficult time keeping up with his silliness. The wise frog is only 3 years older than the orange frog, but the orange frog would make fun of him and called him Sleepy Green. The wise older president sometimes had difficult times pronouncing his words, and even though he was very smart, people thought maybe he was getting too old. You see, when there's an election, people can get very opinionated and sometimes mean and say hateful things. So, after much thinking, the wise older frog decided to hop out of the election. He picked a beautiful, intelligent fairy to run for president instead of him. She would be the first woman fairy to ever run Frog Country. It brought excitement for all, especially everyone that loved the wise older frog. Within days of picking the fairy, the frogs and creatures helping her to get elected, and the fairy herself, had raised millions of gold pebbles to pay for her campaign. It takes a lot of gold pebbles to pay for advertising and traveling to the frog cities. Meanwhile, the orange frog is struggling. He has his loyal followers, and even though he's told lies and cheated, his followers stay true. During the time that the wise older frog was busy being president, the orange frog got arrested. Yes, arrested. But that didn't stop him from hopping for president. He was accused of 34 frog felonies. They found that he was guilty of paying hush money. They call it hush money because it's paid to keep someone from talking about something. He was trying to keep the story about him and the lady frog quiet. They were having froggy grown-up playtimes, and this was while he was married to a different lady frog. And he also got into trouble with another lady frog, and now he has to pay her many, many, many gold pebbles. He's in trouble for other things too, like having special frog documents that he wasn't supposed to have, and trying to overturn the election, which means he tried to change the election results to make it look like he had won when they had the election with the wise older frog a few years earlier. The orange frog says he's innocent, even though he has been proven guilty on some of his charges by a frog court. His followers and many feel that other frogs and creatures are being mean to the orange frog. It is difficult to understand. Meanwhile, the beautiful fairy is busy meeting other fairies, creatures of all kinds, and frogs. She is talking about plans for a better frog country. She believes in many of the ideas the wise older frog has, and she is helping everyone understand why it's important to choose her for president and to get out and vote. The orange frog will keep trying because that's what the orange frog does. He loves being popular with the other frogs and creatures in Frog Country. But being president isn't a popularity contest. The smart fairy wants to win so she can help all frogs and all creatures have better lives, better ponds, better forests and oceans, and better laws, and be able to be proud of their country. The election is coming soon, and I'll be back with part 2. We'll find out what happens with the orange frog and the fairy, an election fairy tale. And remember, the moral of the story is, the brightest, most colorful frog is usually the one with the most poison.